Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, it is crunch time in the college football world. It is now officially week 12. There's very little time left in the college football regular season. Before we know it, we are going to be watching this selection show and knowing who makes the first 12-team college football playoff bracket. But for now, we've still got a big regular season week ahead of us, and we've still got a big DraftKings main slate ahead of us on this Saturday. So we are going to take a look at all 12 games for this Saturday main slate and tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups for each game on this Week 12 main slate. Now, I do think there's a lot of really interesting spots on this slate. There's a lot of different angles that you kind of approach it with. We're going to talk about some of them here on this show specifically, but just know that this is kind of a different slate than the previous ones that we've kind of dealt with. I don't think there's a whole lot of obvious value on this slate, which is certainly going to make building lineups a little bit tougher. And really, a lot of guys have been priced up. So it's going to be a lot more difficult. It's going to be a lot more uncomfortable to build a lineup here this week. So hopefully we're going to give you guys a lot of information that can help make it more comfortable for you to build your lineups here on this slate. Now, week 12 is the week where if you were playing underdog best ball back in the preseason, which I was doing a ton of, this is the first week of the playoffs. And so if you followed any of my streams, followed any of my advice on drafting in those, hopefully you drafted a team that is well equipped to win in week 12 because, week 12 is going to be whether or not you can advance to the next round. So, I am advancing slightly above average number of teams, but not as many as I wanted to. But I mean, it's still technically above average. But I drafted all my teams with week 12 and week 13 in mind. So hopefully we're able to, kind of the fact that our teams are optimally constructed, come through with a good team and make some entries into the finals in week 13, week 14. All right. Anyway, we've gone one way too long. Before we can get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That we can be with us for all the rest of our college football content throughout the rest of the season, as well as all of our college basketball content as well. But we got 12 games to get to. We don't have a whole lot of time to waste. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, game number one is arguably like a play-in game to the American Athletic Championship game. The winner of this game is going to absolutely be in the driver's seat to play in the American Athletic Conference Championship game the first Saturday in December. So this is a big game with a lot of implications. If Boise State were to falter, one of these two teams can very easily find their way into the college football playoff. It is Tulane heading to Annapolis to take on the Navy Midshipmen. Tulane is 6.5-point favorites with a game total of 53.5 points in this one, meaning the implied total is about 30-24 in favor of Tulane. Now, for Tulane, they are a very run-heavy team. They actually have the 5th highest rush rate in the country, which is quite impressive when you consider that 3 of the 4 teams ahead of them are the service academies that run triple option almost every down. And so basically of all non-service academy teams, they rank 2nd in rush rate. So they run the ball a ton. And so what you end up with is a situation where their quarterback, Darian Mensah, to me, I think he's going to get attention from people in this game. He's not going to have a whole lot of my attention. With them running the ball so much and him seeing so few pass attempts, he's never attempted more than 32 passes in a game. You're just not going to get the type of volume from him that is going to allow him to break the slate. And if you're thinking, they run the ball a ton, do they run their quarterback a ton? No, they really don't. He hasn't had more than 6 or 8 carries in a game since the start of the season, and he doesn't have positive rushing yards on the season. So this is just not a guy with a lot of upside, in my opinion. People are going to flock to him because of the price tag and because of the game environment and because the game log doesn't look so bad. But I just don't think his ceiling is that high. And oh, by the way, they will bring in his backup in the red zone and vulture some touchdowns. So I just don't think he's that great of a play. That's just my personal opinion. I think you will see a lot of people play him. I'm not going to be one of those people. The guy I will play for Tulane is running back Mekhi Hughes, who has just been incredible this season. I think you can make an argument that he should be the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year. That's how good I think he has been. And I follow the American Athletic quite a bit because my alma mater, the Charlotte 49ers, are in the American Athletic. And Tulane kind of walloped them on Halloween night. And Mekhi Hughes was a big part of that. Mekhi Hughes has now had 5 straight conference games over 29 fantasy points. Now, Navy's defense, they're kind of balanced in the fact that they are 75th in the nation in passing yards allowed and 81st in the nation in rushing yards allowed. So they're kind of a mediocre defense, either way you slice it. But to me, you get Mekhi Hughes with a high rush rate against a mediocre rushing defense. I think this is a great opportunity to play Mekhi Hughes. And I think $7,600 is way too cheap. At the wide receiver position, I actually don't mind some of these wide receiver plays as one-offs simply because they are a super condensed passing offense. Mario Williams, the USC transfer, has been their number one wide receiver on the season. He's quite good. He's been in double-digit fantasy points in 3 straight games. Like I said, I don't mind him as a one-off play. I think that you can play these Tulane receiving pieces because even if they're not passing the ball a whole lot, 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown is a whole lot different than 50 passing yards and a touchdown. Dante Fleming and Keith Brown are 2 other guys that I would look out for as one-off plays. I don't think they are bad either, but I would probably stick it to Williams, Brown, and Fleming. I really wouldn't look too outside the box with this passing attack. It's pretty condensed around those 3 guys. Now, on the Navy side, the one worry in this game, to me, I would be seriously concerned about the over in this game, is the fact that both these teams, with them running the ball so much, the clock is just going to continue to run and continue to run. You might get fewer possessions than expected in this game because of the fact that both teams are just running the ball so heavily. With Navy, they rank 3rd in the nation in rush rate because they're still running the triple option. And a big piece of that triple option attack is Blake Horvath. Now, here's the thing with Blake Horvath. You look at his game log, and he has not been over 22 fantasy points in 4 straight games, which are all either conference games or the game against Notre Dame, so another Power 4 opponent, right? And really, I think he just beat up against bad competition early in the season when he was putting up nuclear DFS numbers. And this Tulane rushing defense is pretty stout. They rank 22nd in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game. So this is another quarterback that I think you're going to see people play him because they know of the rushing upside of Blake Horvath. They know that he has the potential to break a slate, but I just don't see it being a very likely outcome here in this one when Tulane's got a really good rushing defense. And like I said, I think the general number of possessions in this game is going to be lowered. At the running back position, we mentioned it before, but Alex Texka, I hope I said that correctly, is the guy that I would want to be targeting in this rushing attack. He is the B-back, which means he is the dive guy on all of their triple option plays. He is going to see the most consistent projectable volume, whereas Eli Heidenreich is used more as of a slot and like a pitchback type of role as their A-back. He's going to be much less consistent volume, but he does have potential to hit home run plays. But like I said, I would rather play Teska with his more guaranteed projectable volume at 4,500, and I am not messing with a Navy receiver because they're just going to be running the football. Game number 2 is my Texas Longhorns heading to Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks. And this is kind of a revenge game for Texas. If you were around 3 years ago, like following this Texas program, the first year of Steve Sarkisian, they went to Arkansas early in the season in a non-conference game and got absolutely whomped by the Razorbacks. And it was just kind of a sign that's like, hey, this team is not ready to physically compete in the SEC. Well, guess what? Now they are. And so I think Texas is going to come into this game ready to make a statement that this is not the Texas of 3 years ago. Texas is 13.5-point favorites in this game with a game total of 57.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 36-22 in favor of the Longhorns. Let's talk about that Longhorns offense. So Quinn Ewers had by far his best game of the season against Florida, and I was kind of hating on it, but really he scored all the touchdowns. And if you're an offense that's projected to score a lot of points and you get all the touchdowns, then you're going to get all the DraftKings points, right? And so he ended up with 36 DraftKings points in that game against Florida. I think that this is a situation where you can target Quinn Ewers again. I don't think a lot of people are going to go back to him, but I think this is a situation where you can go back to him. And here's the reason why. First off, we just mentioned they're implied 36 points. That's 5 touchdowns. If he again accounts for the 5 touchdowns, he's going to have a successful day in DraftKings. But the second point is this. Arkansas is the first of many teams on this slate that we are going to talk about that is a pass funnel. And what I mean by that is they are a significantly better run defense than they are a pass defense. And they are going to essentially shut down the run in a way that is going to force teams to pass the ball and force a lot of passing volume. Arkansas on the season ranks 46th in rushing yards allowed. They have stifled numerous running backs like Ollie Gordon Jr., and they rank 122nd in the nation in passing yards allowed. They have allowed numerous quarterbacks like Alan Bowman of Oklahoma State to have really successful DFS days against them. So I think Quinn Ewers can absolutely add to the list. And like I said, you're just hoping and praying that he is the one that's scoring the touchdowns for them. If you see him get tackled at the one on a run or his wide receiver get tackled in the one, then you know it's probably going to be you're in for a bad day. But if he's the one scoring the touchdowns, it's going to be a great day. At the running back position, it does look like a 3-headed monster when you look at the game log from last week against Florida. But Jared Gibson did lead that game in carries, and it was largely because the game was out of hand at halftime. That was when he was getting his carries, was when the game was out of hand. If this game is going to be close, it's going to be Wisner and Blue who are getting the carries. Wisner did not have a whole lot of success on the ground against Florida, but he did catch 3 passes for 59 yards and one of those Quinn Ewers touchdowns. Blue had more success on the ground, 5 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown, and also caught 3 passes for 67 yards. Personally, even though Wisner has been better throughout this middle part of the season, kind of dating back to the start of October, I'm kind of in on Blue because I think people are playing Wisner, and I'd rather just have a guy at lower ownership, right? And Blue has certainly carved out a role in the passing game, and Blue has certainly shown the ability to break off long runs and long catches. So I think that Jaden Blue is actually a pretty interesting play here in this one. And like I said, I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be playing him. And, I've kind of crapped on running back committees on this podcast numerous times this year, last year, and even the year before, if you go all the way back to that. But if you're going to be targeting a running back committee, you want there to be a chance for explosive plays, which Blue certainly possesses. You want there to be an offense that's projected to score a lot of points. Texas is projected to score 36. And you want there to be a cheap price tag. Blue's 5,500. He's a guy that's certainly going to make my player pool this week. At the wide receiver position, we have commented how this has been kind of a mess for Texas, but Isaiah Bond was back last week, and he kind of showed that he's this team's number one. 3 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Got the ball on a reverse, carried it for 44 yards, almost scored on that play. To me, he's this wide receiver 1 for this team. He's the guy you want to target. He's your stacking partner with Quinn Ewers, and I think the guy that is starting to separate his stacking partner number 2 is Matthew Golden. He was only targeted 3 times against Florida, but 2 of which turned into touchdowns. He's only 3,400. And again, kind of the recurring theme with this Texas team, they're implied to score about 5 touchdowns. If you find the guy who has the 2 or 3 touchdown game, you're instantly going to find the guy that has a chance to break the slate. And so Bond and Golden would be my 2 favorite nominees. And don't forget about Gunnar Helm, the tight end. He is only $3,100. To me, that is a misprice. He should be more expensive than that. It's unlikely that he's going to give you enough fantasy points to entirely break a slate, but $3,100, you can get your 10 to 12 fantasy points out of him and just kind of keep pace with the rest of your lineup. And I think he gives you a lot of flexibility because of how cheap he is as well. He's a guy that's going to make my player pool also. On the Arkansas side, they've got Taylon Green at 8,200. Taylon Green is primarily a running quarterback, but Texas's defense is very stout in both the run and the pass. They currently rank as the 21st best rushing defense in the nation by yards allowed per game, and they currently rank as the best defense in the nation in terms of passing yards allowed per game. So either way you slice it for Taylon Green, this is not a great matchup. He's priced up at $8,200. We have seen him have big games against bad defenses and struggle against better defenses. This is a game where he's probably not going to make my player pool. At the running back position, Jaquindon Jackson is questionable. He has not played since the LSU game. And what you have seen since then is just an absolute cluster of a running back committee. Rashad Dubinion has been getting the most projectable volume, but it's really hard to talk myself into one of those guys. The guy that I would be playing if I were would be Rashad Dubinion, but I don't think you have to play anybody going up against this Texas defense like this. If Taylon Green is active, Andrew Armstrong has a little bit of interest from me just because of how often he gets targeted and how much this passing game revolves around him. But he's quite expensive at $6,900. Maybe you could make an argument for this being a stackable game. The game total is 57.5. Maybe you could run a few Texas guys, run Green and Armstrong on the back end of it and hope and pray that they account for a few touchdowns. But I don't see that as being necessarily a likely outcome. Game number 3 is going to be Fox's Big Noon Saturday game, which is actually a 10 a.m. local kickoff game, which just seems crazy to me. 10 a.m. local kickoff. Anyway, it is Utah at Colorado. Colorado is currently 10-point favorites with a game total of 47.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 29-19 in favor of the Buffaloes. So on the Utah side, they're going to be going back to Isaac Wilson as their starting quarterback. He is Zach Wilson's younger brother, and that is because of the injury to Brendan Rose. Wilson, in his time as the starter, has only one game above 14 fantasy points, and it was not against a Power 4 opponent. It was against Utah State. So to me, he's just a hard pass. I just don't see any way in which he's going to give you a viable salary, which, again, we always want at least 3 times value for their price tag. So he would need 21 DraftKings points. I'm not seeing it. At the running back position, I do like Micah Bernard, though. So Colorado is not a great running defense. We've talked time and time again about how they lack depth on their front seven of their defense. They rank 67th in the nation in rush yards allowed at 150 rushing yards per game. And Micah Bernard is a pretty big workhorse. So if they actually do get to 150 rushing yards per game, it's going to be quite likely that Micah Bernard hits over the 100-yard mark. And if this team is going to score 19 points like they're projected, it's quite likely that Micah Bernard is going to score at least 1 touchdown. So I think he's a pretty solid play. If you're looking for like a super like home run, shot in the dark, GPP dart throw type of play, Jalen Glover could be that guy. He was a member of Utah's running back committee last year. He played in the very first game of the season, did not play for 8 straight weeks. Now he's back. He's only gotten 4 carries in each of the last 2 games, but I think that there's a chance his role could increase because his role last year was much bigger than this. $3,000 even. If you want to take a super like nuclear shot, go for it. But I probably won't, but I just wanted to kind of get the information out there to you guys. Now, the wide receiver position is where Utah gets interesting. Their starting tight end and best receiving option, Brant Kuithe, is out for the rest of the season. When you look at their depth charts online, supposedly Dallin Bentley and Landon King are the next 2 in line for the tight end position, but neither of them have really shown anything in their game log that's any indication that they will be. But Utah loves to target their tight ends. And so, I don't know, maybe they're worth a shot. Maybe they're worth a GPP dart throw, right? Dorian Singer is going to have a chance to absolutely be a volume king without Kuithe in the lineup. He had 9 targets last week against BYU. Here's the problem, though, is that Singer operates on the outside, and Travis Hunter has pretty much been just a total, like, island for outside receivers this season all year long. That's not a great matchup for him. Micah Pittman is the starting slot. He does not get a lot of work generally, but if, teams generally target the slot against Colorado, so I think he might be worth a look at $3,300, but certainly not a safe play by any means. On the Colorado side, they've got Shedeur Sanders, who is, I think, a pretty solid play. So this is a kind of a mismatched play. And what I mean by that is he's very expensive, but Colorado ranks 8th in pass rate. Utah ranks 28th in passing yards allowed per game, but Colorado is implied to score 29 points. So, they're going to throw the ball all over the yard. They're going to give him a ton of passing volume. It's just a matter of whether he can turn enough of that volume into success against a good defense to hit value for his price tag. I certainly think there's a chance he does so, and I certainly think there's some very obvious stacking candidates. So he is a guy that is going to make my player pool. Now, in terms of those stacking candidates, I'm not going to be targeting him with Travis Hunter. Maybe that burns me. Maybe it doesn't. I just think they're way too expensive as a combined stack. Like, you're talking $9,700 for Travis Hunter, $9,700 for Shedeur Sanders. That is $19,400 of salary. And so combined, 3 times value, you're going to need them to hit about 60 fantasy points between the two of them, which is just a super lofty target. I just don't really kind of like the idea of that. LeJounte Wester is a really solid stacking partner. He was targeted 7 times against Texas Tech, put up 20 fantasy points in that game. Jimmy Horn Jr. was injured apparently in the tortilla throwing incident against Texas Tech. He didn't play after that. I don't know what happened. But he is a guy that still sees the field all the time. Will Shepherd is a guy that we kind of talked about last week in terms of he's on the field all the time. So if you're looking at a good offense with a guy that's on the field all the time, eventually he's going to have big games. And he's had big games in 4 of the last 5. He's been over 15 DraftKings points. He's $3,600. So he's absolutely a guy that's going to get consideration from me. I think he's going to be quite popular on this slate, but I think it's for good reason. I think he's one of the best cheap wide receiver plays on the slate and is a very easy stacking partner with Shedeur Sanders that can make building the rest of your lineup manageable because it'll give you over $6,000 average remaining salary when you plug the 2 of them in. Next up, we've got Clemson taking on Pittsburgh. So Clemson is 10-point favorites in this game with a game total of 54.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 32-22 in favor of Clemson. I am very tempted to kind of give the moniker to this one of the Fraud Bowl because I think that both of these teams were looking good when they were playing on very weak schedules. Now that they've played some quality competition, they don't look so hot. But now they get to play each other, so we'll see who wins this one. Clemson, I do think, is a really good team to target, though, just because there's such a condensed offense and they're implied to score 32 points. So in terms of playing Cade Klubnik, Pitt allows 253 passing yards per game, which ranks 104th in the country. That's really good to target for a quarterback, right? And Cade Klubnik, one thing that's kind of really unlocked him as a fantasy player this season is his rushing ability. And he's ran for 27 combined running attempts in his last 2 games. Even though those last 2 games have been nothing special, nothing to write home about, he's running the ball a lot. He's throwing the ball a lot. There's a lot to like with Cade Klubnik, and it's a pretty good matchup through the air. So he's definitely going to be one of my top quarterback plays of this slate. At the running back position, Pittsburgh is a very tough run defense, but Phil Mafa's workload is ridiculous. He has touched the ball 35 times against Louisville and 27 times against Virginia Tech in the last 2 games. That's crazy. That's insane. He's being priced up a little bit, but I think he's absolutely worth it. You look at his salary of $7,300, and he has 4 games this season of 3x value or more. That's pretty solid. Even though Pitt's a tough run defense, I think the fact that his workload is just so good, I think that's a guy that you can absolutely look at and feel pretty comfortable playing at 7,300. At the wide receiver position, Antonio Williams is obviously their wide receiver 1, was targeted 8 times last week against Virginia Tech. Not a successful DFS day because he didn't find the end zone and didn't really break off any big plays, but still their leader in targets, still their guy, plays the most snaps at the wide receiver spot. Jake Browning, still the tight end, still plays all the time. Solid play. Both of them two are just really consistent, really solid plays, in my opinion. After that, you get a little bit of a rotation amongst the receivers for Clemson. But what you get is, if they do score a touchdown or they do break off a big play, they instantly pay for themselves, right? Bryant Wesco Jr., freshman. We were all over him last week. He only had 1 catch for 17 yards against Virginia Tech. A little bit of a disappointment. His profile is still indicative of one, though, that I will be playing as a cheap wide receiver because he breaks off big plays. And at $3,800, he breaks off a 60-yard touchdown. He's instantly paid for himself. TJ Moore is the guy that actually did that last week. He had 2 catches for 58 yards, one of which was a 41-yard touchdown. And so he had 13.8 fantasy points, paid off his salary in 1 week. After Williams and Bringstool, this wide receiver rotation, Wesco and Moore are 2 of them. Stellato is going to play a little bit. Randall's going to play a little bit. But really, I would probably rank them in the order that I just mentioned: Wesco, Moore, Stellato, and then Randall for my money. Next up, let's talk about the Pitt side. So Eli Holstein is questionable for this game. And Eli Holstein is a guy that will not make my player pool, even if he is active, because he's been really bad against good defenses. Clemson's a good defense, so not going to be playing him. If he does not play, Nate Yarnell will be the starter. And look, we saw Nate Yarnell as the starter last year. It was not pretty. I don't think this offense is going to be the same offense with Nate Yarnell as the starting quarterback. At the running back spot, I do think that you can make an argument that Holstein being out would be good news for Desmond Reed, because it would mean that he would get more checkdowns in the passing game, of which his usage is elite. It means that he would probably get more carries because they're not going to let Yarnell throw it 40 times. But the problem is that Clemson's a pretty stout run defense, and especially if you're one-dimensional, they rank 39th in the nation in rush yards allowed. So Desmond Reed, I think, is a little too pricey for my taste here on this one. If he was in the 8K range, not the 9K range, he would probably be a guy that I could really talk myself into, especially if they had a backup quarterback. Now, if they do have a backup quarterback, that's going to kind of neuter some of the receivers a little bit for Pitt. But Kanata Mumfield is questionable. I've been kind of talking all season about how I think he's very clearly their top receiver. I have no idea what his status is going to be for this game. But if he is out, that certainly opens the door for Kenny Johnson and Raphael Williams Jr. to have bigger roles and bigger games. So if Holstein does start, maybe the 2 of them could be worth looking at, because they're certainly going to see more snaps, more targets, more potential for DraftKings points. All right, that's going to do it for the first 4 games. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather and then get on with the rest of the slate. Before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have for me if you reach out on Twitter. I also try to get all updates for the show out there as well. And keep in mind that I'm recording this show on a Tuesday night. The games don't kick off until Saturday. So, sometimes my opinions change on players in between now and then. But, if you want my thoughts on a guy, or injury opens something up, just reach out. I'm more than happy to share. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. The Fantasy Corner Discord is a great community to be a part of. It is a lot of people who play DFS for a lot of different sports who are always in the chat, just talking lineups, talking strategies, talking ideas, talking plays, and then sweating it out together. It's an absolute blast to be a part of. And I cannot recommend it enough if you're looking for people to talk DFS with. Also, if you're wondering who actually makes my DFS lineups, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I write an article with my core plays for every single college football and college basketball DFS slate. So you can get all of those on the Patreon. And I can't just sit here and guarantee that you're going to win thousands of dollars just by plugging him in. It's not that easy. But what I can guarantee is that you can get well-researched, well-thought-out thoughts from somebody who knows what they're doing with this stuff and understands both DFS and college football X's and O's. All right, so let's go ahead and continue with the next game, which is going to be Syracuse taking on Cal, a bi-coastal ACC game. Cal is 8.5-point favorites in this game with a game total of 55.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 32-24 in favor of the Golden Bears. Now for Syracuse, Cal is a much better pass defense to target than run defense. They rank 10th in the nation in rushing yards allowed, 71st in passing yards allowed, and that's good news for Syracuse because all they want to do is throw the ball. They rank 3rd in the nation in pass rate, and the guy that is going to be throwing it for him is Cal McCord. And he is a very enigmatic player. You have no idea what you're going to get from him whenever he suits up. And I've honestly just quit trying to predict it because you just don't know. He's a guy that I think he's a GPP play. I don't think he's a cash game play. If you put him in your lineup, you might get good Kyle McCord. You might not. Take a shot. Like, why not, right? If that's something you're comfortable doing, go for it. If it's not, don't. At the running back position, they do have LaQuint Allen, who, like I said, this is a tough rushing matchup, and he's seen tough rushing matchups before, but he has such great usage in the passing game. He's caught 16 passes over the last 3 games, and to me, that usage in the passing game makes him a viable play no matter what the matchup is. So I am going to be playing LaQuint Allen at $8,600. I think because of his usage in the passing game, you can stack him with McCord. You can play him as a one-off. You can play him as a game stack. There's a lot of different ways you can utilize LaQuint Allen because of how his usage works out. Now, Syracuse has been really weird at wide receiver this season because they started out as being super condensed, and then they kind of like started getting guys back in the lineup and then became super spread out. But now they're back to being condensed again. Last week in their game against Boston College, Oronde Gadsden had 12 targets. Jackson Meeks had 11. Trevor Pena had 8. Justin Ross Simmons had 3. I would be targeting my efforts in this Syracuse passing game around Meeks, Pena, and Gadsden. And really, if you're playing Cal McCord, because of the passing volume that they're going to have with them being so high in pass rate, I would honestly make the argument that you might want to play 1 or 2 of those 3 pass catchers with Cal McCord. And they're not super expensive, so they're not going to price you out of the rest of your lineup either. On the Cal side, they've got Fernando Mendoza at quarterback. And Syracuse is a defense that is kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about. They are very much a run funnel, not a pass funnel. Syracuse ranks 34th in the nation in pass yards allowed and 90th in rush yards allowed. So this is a defense that you're going to want to run the ball on. And so to me, that does not bode well for Fernando Mendoza, who has uncharacteristically had 2 huge games, one against Oregon State and one against Wake Forest, where he was over 36 DraftKings points in both games. That has not been his MO for his entire career as a starter at Cal. It's very strange, if I'm being honest. I don't expect him to repeat that success against this tough Syracuse pass defense, so he's probably a pass for me. Jaden Ott is a guy that I'm going to be going with, though. He's back to kind of being the starter again. He wasn't super effective against Wake, 14 carries, 23 yards, but he was used in the passing game, caught 4 passes, and this is a bad run defense in Syracuse. So I think this is the time to go back to Jaden Ott and buy him at kind of a low price tag for what we know him to be in his last 2 years at Cal. Now, at the wide receiver position, Tobias Merriweather, the Notre Dame transfer, got healthy last week for the game against Wake and instantly was their wide receiver 1. 6 catches, 52 yards, and a touchdown in that game. To me, he's the only playable option. Injuries, Hunter and Matthews also saw great usage in that Wake game, but it was very clear to me that Merriweather is going to be the guy in this passing offense just after seeing him play one time. Next up, we have the game at the Swamp, LSU taking on Florida. LSU is 4.5-point favorites with a game total of 54.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 30-25 in favor of the Tigers. For LSU, they are a team that wants to win by throwing the football. They rank 5th in the nation in pass rate. That's quite high, which means Garrett Nussmeier is going to be throwing the ball all over the yard. And he's kind of turned that into some success and not success this season. He's played 5 conference games so far. He's been over 28 DraftKings points in 2 of them. That's pretty solid, and certainly worth a look, in my opinion, at a salary of $9,100. Florida is a defense that's bad in both regards. They rank 90th in passing yards allowed per game and 98th in rushing yards allowed per game. Last week against Texas, they gave up over 300 yards to Quinn Ewers, 5 touchdowns in that game. There's no reason that Nussmeier can't do the same. At the running back position, this kind of feels like it could be a Caden Durham breakout game for me. We mentioned how Florida's run defense is bad. Caden Durham would likely never see like a huge volume of carries, if we're being honest. But what he is a guy that can break off long runs at a moment's notice. He gets used in the passing game. And when you look at his game logs, all of his best games came in like the big wins for LSU. And this very much has the potential to be a big win, in my opinion. More on that in a second. At the wide receiver spot, Kyron Lacy continues to be the most targeted receiver in this passing attack. But I continue to kind of bang the drum that his targets aren't that lucrative. Like he's not, getting targeted deep down the field. He's not getting targeted in the end zone. So all those targets just kind of are empty targets, in my opinion. And he's not a guy that I'm willing to play at $8,000 unless I was stacking with Nussmeier, in which case I'd rather stack Aaron Anderson. He is much more of a big play threat. He saw 5 targets last week, which was less than Lacy, but his targets are worth more than an average Lacy target. So Anderson is a guy that I would consider. I also like the tight end Mason Taylor quite a bit. He's consistently used in this passing game. And then after that, it's a bunch of wild cards. You don't really know how much CJ Daniels, Chris Hilton Jr., or Xavion Thomas are going to be used. One of them could break off a big game. They could also be like a 2-snap and 0 target type of game. You don't really know what to expect. That's just been the case with this LSU passing offense this season. On the Florida side, honestly, this Florida team could be dead on arrival if DJ Lagway does not play. I have no idea if he's going to play in this game or not, but their offense has looked absolutely incompetent in the last 6 quarters with Aiden Warner at quarterback. Against Texas, he was quite bad, especially in the first half going up against Texas starters. In the second half against Georgia, he was quite bad. There's no way I'm playing Aiden Warner. Just have no desire to do it. And to me, he makes the offense almost entirely unplayable. Obviously, if Lagway is back, that makes the skill position players much more playable for Florida. But what's also interesting is you could have a little bit of value. Montrell Johnson Jr. is their normal starting running back. He's questionable for this game. If he is out, Jaden Ball becomes very much a volume-based play. He's had at least 17 carries in the last 3 games, all of which were against tough defenses, and he played pretty well in 2 of them. So if Montrell Johnson continues to be out, I do think Ball is playable no matter who's at quarterback. And then Elijah Badger is questionable for this one. So Chimere Deke should absolutely be the wide receiver 1. Against Texas, he had 5 catches for 95 yards on 8 targets, and that was with Aiden Warner at quarterback. If DJ Lagway is playing, I think that makes Deke one of the best cheap wide receiver plays on the entire slate. Without Lagway, I think he's a volume-based dart throw if Badger continues to be out. Next up, we have got Boston College taking on SMU. SMU is 17-point favorites with a game total of 53.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 35-18 in favor of the Mustangs. On the Boston College side, we got a big shakeup. They've announced that they will be starting Grayson James at quarterback this week, and he is a Florida international transfer. He started 1 game this season when Thomas Castellanos was hurt against Western Kentucky. Was not impressive, 16 DraftKings points. I will not be playing him. I don't think he has the upside to give us what we needed, a salary of $6,700 on DraftKings. Now, what I do want to play, though, is I do want to play Kyle Robichaux. And the reason why is when you look at the 1 game that Grayson James started, they were certainly more run-heavy. Robichaux had 18 carries in that game against Western Kentucky. And then last week, when Grayson James played most of it when Thomas Castellanos was hurt, Robichaux had 28 carries and turned it into 34.8 DraftKings points. Now, a big reason why is because Treshaun Ward was unexpectedly out for that game against Syracuse. If Ward is out again, Robichaux becomes an absolute smash play, in my opinion. And I think he's a solid play, even if Ward is back in the lineup, because I do think them to run the ball more with Grayson James at quarterback. Now, the only issue is that SMU is an elite run defense. They rank 6th in the nation in rushing yards allowed, but they played a lot of teams that are not exactly great at running the football. So it doesn't shock me when you look at their schedule that they do rank that highly in that metric. For the wide receiver position for Boston College, Lewis Bond is the only one you can even remotely consider, in my opinion. And with Grayson James, I think that makes him less considerable. In the 1 game Grayson James started, he had 7 catches for 21 yards. That's insanely low. Like his catches were the length of a CVS receipt. All right, next up, we've got SMU. They're implied for 35 points. So this is an offense that is absolutely worth targeting, in my opinion. Kevin Jennings is their quarterback. He has been chalk pretty much every time he's been on a DraftKings slate because he's always been in the $6K range in terms of salary, at least for the last month and a half. Now he's not. Now he's priced up at $7,700, and I think that might finally price him out of being chalk here on DraftKings. He's hit 3 times value in 3 of his 6 starts and only 4 times value in 1 of his 6 starts for his current salary. So he's not just this instant auto play at a low salary. You kind of got to think about it a little bit, but they are implied to score 35 points. He does have rushing upside. I do think he's absolutely a reasonable play. I also do really like Brashad Smith. He is back to being the workhorse back that he was at the start of the season. 26 and 23 carries in his last 2 games, 31 and 43 DraftKings points in his last 2 games. I think he's a great look at $8,800. against a Boston College team that only ranks 48th in rushing yards allowed per game. At the wide receiver position, we've kind of opined the last 2 years how SMU plays a massive rotation at wide receiver. It never really allows one of them to be super productive. But now, because there's so many injuries, they can only play so many guys. And so Hudson's going to be out there. Roger Daniels is going to be out there. And then Keyshawn Smith is going to be out there. And then Matthew Hibner is going to be at tight end. And so if only those 4 guys are playing, they're all 4 cheap. And to me, that makes them all absolutely playable. Like, to me, the absolute last ditch guy would be Moochie Dixon all the way down here at $3,000 even. But if there's less guys in the rotation, then they're going to play more snaps. They're going to be more playable. So I do think that does make for some viable stacking partners for Kevin Jennings. Next up, we've got Louisville taking on Stanford. Louisville is 20.5-point favorites in this game with a game total of 58.5 points. Stanford's bad, y'all. They're bad. The implied total is 39-19 in favor of Louisville, and that is not shocking when you look at Stanford and what they've done recently. Like, their last 2 games, they've given up 59 points to NC State, 27 points to Wake, 40 points to SMU, 49 points to Notre Dame, 40 points to Clemson. Like, they're just a bad defense and a bad team. And so I think Louisville is going to put up a lot of points. Stanford on average gives up 276 passing yards per game, ranking 123rd in the nation. They're slightly better against the run, ranking 78th in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game. So Tyler Shuck is a guy we've been kind of complaining about all season, how he hasn't shown a high ceiling. His maximum game was 29 DraftKings points, which is good, but it's not enough to break a slate. This could be the week that he does it with how bad this Stanford defense is playing. He's a guy that's certainly going to make my lineups. I think you can play him in cash or GPPs because I do think he still possesses a high floor, but I think that his ceiling is increased this week because of the matchup against Stanford. Isaac Brown is their starting running back, and he is approaching workhorse status. 18 carries against Boston College, 20 carries against Clemson, 25 DraftKings points or more in both of those games. Like I said, Stanford's a pretty stout run defense, but because of the volume that he's seeing, it makes Brown pretty much a matchup-proof play, in my opinion. And then at the wide receiver position, Colin Lacey is out for the season. So Ja'Cory Brooks is kind of taken back over the alpha wide receiver role. I think he makes a lot of sense as a stacking partner with Tyler Shuck. You are also going to see increased roles out of Chris Bell and Amari Higgins-Bruce. So I don't mind them as cheap dart throws if you're looking to try to catch lightning in a bottle with a cheap wide receiver. On the Stanford side, they're going to play 2 quarterbacks. Ashton Daniels is the more mobile one, has a ton more upside, had 29 DraftKings points, not even playing a full game against NC State. Justin Lamson is more of a pocket passer, even though he will run a little bit. He's not the type to break off long runs. He actually had 15 DraftKings points not playing a full game against NC State. I don't know what to make of the situation. If they're splitting snaps, I don't think you can certainly play either of them. Daniels would have my interest if he was playing, though, because he is a guy who can put up random big fantasy games because of his running ability. At the running back spot, this is just a mess. This team is not good at running the football. They've had guys in and out of the lineup. It's just not something I'm interested in targeting. At the wide receiver position, I literally only have interest in Alec Manor. He would be at the top of the list of wide receivers most likely to transfer to a better team in the offseason, in my opinion. He is great. He's an NFL talent, in my opinion. He's their most targeted wide receiver. He's going to see a ton of targets, whether they're winning, losing, starters in, backups in, whatever. He's going to play. He's going to see a lot of targets, and he's going to have an opportunity to put up a lot of DraftKings points. I think you can play him as a bring back on a Louisville stack and hope that Stanford can keep this game somewhat close to, kind of keep the Louisville starters in the game. Manor would be a guy who could do that. We've seen him have huge games over the last few seasons. Next up, we've got Virginia taking on Notre Dame. Notre Dame is 23-point favorites with a game total of 50.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 37-14 in favor of the Irish. On the Virginia side, they've got Anthony Calandre at quarterback. He did not play all that well against Pitt. There's kind of been the threat, the looming threat of him getting benched throughout the season. He hasn't been benched yet, but Notre Dame is a really good defense, and so if they're going to have a quick leash on him against a really good defense, I just have no desire to play him. At the running back position, Kobe Pace is their guy. Again, going up against Notre Dame, I have no desire to play him. Seriously, has anybody other than Ontario Brown had a DFS viable game against Notre Dame this season? I can't think of one, honestly. Xavier Brown is the running back too. He did have 15 carries in that game against Pitt. It looked pretty good. Honestly, scored 2 touchdowns, 23.6 DraftKings points. He's only $3,700, but I'm not even going to talk myself into it against this Notre Dame defense. At the wide receiver position, Malachi Fields has been by far the alpha wide receiver for this Virginia team throughout the season, but he has not been good in either of his last 2 games. A combined 10.9 DraftKings points in those 2 games. A little bit of a disappointment. I'm not going to be going back to him against this Notre Dame defense. Now, one guy I will play, if you want to take a trip down narrative street with me, is Chris Tyree. He is a Notre Dame transfer. He's the starting slot receiver for Virginia, which is the role we saw Malik Washington in last season when he had bonkers numbers. And he's a really good athlete. He has a chance to break off big plays. They can use him in creative ways. And oh, by the way, he's a Notre Dame transfer. Going up against his former team. If you're Virginia, you want to try to get this guy in the end zone against his former team, I think it's a possibility. And this is a guy that, like I said, they can get him the ball in design plays. He's finally healthy. He's finally a part of the offense. He's a guy I was super high on in best ball drafts back in the summer. I still have him on a few of my best ball teams that advanced to the playoffs this week. So selfishly, I would love for Tyree to have a big game, and I think it could absolutely happen. I'm talking myself into it for narrative reasons as well as for the actual on-field reasons. On the Notre Dame side, they've got Riley Leonard at quarterback. Look, he's a great DFS option, regardless of what you think about his actual quarterbacking ability in terms of throwing the football. He's a great DFS option. He's been over 29 DraftKings points in 3 of his last 4 games. All of those games have been blowouts pretty much. And all of those games, the DraftKings scoring from Leonard is coming from his legs. He has had a rushing touchdown in the last 8 games for Notre Dame. It's quite impressive. If he does it again, then he'll have another good DFS day, right? He's $9,500. He needs those legs to churn out numbers. Jeremiah Love is the Notre Dame running back who has scored a touchdown in every game also, kind of like Riley Leonard. What you're starting to see with him, though, is in these blowouts, he's not getting as much work. As you're more dependent on him breaking off long runs in order to hit value. And what you're seeing more in these blowouts is Jadarian Price getting a lot of run. Last week against FSU, he had 7 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown. He's a guy that I'm going to be playing as a super cheap running back dart throw because, like I said, in these blowout games, they really do like to give Price the rock more than Jeremiah Love. And then Aeneas Williams is another guy that we'll see carries in blowouts. But like I said, Price is the guy that I'm looking for primarily from this Notre Dame running back room because I do think that they're going to go up early in this game, and I do think they're not going to want to put miles on the tires of Jeremiah Love. The wide receiver position, I'm not playing a Notre Dame receiver. I've talked about it ad nauseum. Evans is the tight end. They're starting to get him more and more involved. Collins is kind of the physical jump ball receiver. He might score a touchdown. Greathouse is supremely talented, but they don't really get him the ball a whole lot. Chris Mitchell is the guy that I still think can unlock this passing offense with his speed and downfield ability, but they continue to not do it. There you go, Notre Dame receivers. Next up, we've got Penn State taking on Purdue. Penn State is 28.5-point favorites with a game total of 50.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 40-11 in favor of Penn State. On the Penn State side, this is if you've ever watched the show The League, you remember how in The League, how that everybody had their taco bye. This is Penn State's Purdue bye. Like, it's not a bye week, but it might as well be. Purdue's awful. They're the worst team in Power 4 football, in my opinion. And Drew Aller is getting that matchup. Drew Aller has not been great in DFS lately, but hey, you know what will be great for you in DFS? Playing Purdue. And this Penn State team's implied to score 40 points. If they score multiple touchdowns, if Drew Aller gets multiple touchdowns, then he can absolutely hit value at his salary of $7,000. To me, he's a touchdown or bust type of play. At the running back position, so we have seen Penn State do this season. Nick Singleton precautionarily missed a game early in the season, and Kaytron Allen saw all the carries in that game. That was the game against UCLA. UCLA is a pretty good run defense, and Kaytron Allen had 21 carries, put up 14.9 DraftKings points. If Singleton misses this game, I think Kaytron Allen is an absolute smash play against a Purdue team that is allowing the 2nd most rushing yards per game out of any Power 4 team in the nation. Trivia, who's first? It's actually Oklahoma State, believe it or not. Purdue 2nd. So this is a great matchup for a running back, and if Singleton is out, and then that just means Allen is going to see the lion's share of the carries, and it makes Allen one of the best running back plays on the slate. So as the week goes by, make sure you're keeping track of the status of Nick Singleton. Even if Singleton is active, I think both Singleton and Allen are smash plays in this matchup against Purdue. On the wide receiver spot, Tyler Warren continues to be too expensive, but he continues producing. I don't know what to make of it. He also just keeps getting these wildcat rushing touchdowns. I'm not going to chase it. What I do know, though, is that early in the season against weaker competition, Harrison Wallace caught some deep balls, and he could absolutely do that again. He had 5 for 84 last week against Washington. I could see it being a thing again. He's a guy that if you're looking for a cheap punt play wide receiver, you can talk yourself into it. On the Purdue side, do I have to? Hudson Card is their starter. He had 2 DraftKings points against Ohio State. I don't expect it to be a whole lot different in this one. Devin Mockabee is their running back. He sees a consistent workload. He gets usage in the passing game. Problem is this offense don't score a whole lot of points. There's not a whole lot of opportunities for him to score touchdowns. The wide receiver spot, their best weapon is Max Clare. But again, this offense doesn't score a lot of points. There's not a whole lot of opportunities for him to find the end zone. There you go, Purdue. 2 games left. Next up, we have Baylor heading to Morgantown to take on West Virginia. Baylor is 2.5-point favorites in this game with a game total of 58.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 30-28 in favor of Baylor. And these are like two of the top 5 most frustrating offenses to target in DFS because like they just rotate receivers and you never know which receiver is going to have the big game. And they play a lot of running backs. They're kind of annoying to play, but there's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. So if you have a good read on it and you feel like you can target the guys who are going to score those points, you could have a winning lineup. Sawyer Robertson is the quarterback for Baylor. He does bring some rushing upside. He is generally a pretty good option in DFS. He was over 32 DraftKings points in 3 of his previous 5 games. That's pretty solid for a guy who's priced up $8,700. I think there's better quarterback plays on the slate. Like if I'm being honest, I would rather play Leonard. I would rather play McCord. I would rather play Nussmeier. I would rather play Klubnik. But in terms of the high-priced quarterback options, like Robertson is right there, right in that group with them. He's probably going to make my player pool, but not going to be a huge part of it. At the running back position, Bryson Washington looks like more and more every week that he's becoming their guy. 17 carries against Oklahoma State, 26 carries against TCU, 50 DraftKings points in that game against TCU, which is insane. He had 4 touchdowns in that game. Don't expect that again, but he finally has emerged as the workhorse from the committee. And West Virginia is a better run defense than a pass defense. They're an awful pass defense. So I think this is actually a good week to kind of fade Bryson Washington and let everybody else chase that 50 fantasy point performance, and I'm going to play somebody else. The wide receiver spot, they're frustrating. They're so frustrating. Cameron, Hawkins, Presley are the guys that are playing the most right now. Trigg is the tight end. Good luck figuring out which one of them is going to go off, but those guys are the ones who have been like the every down players. Cameron, Hawkins, Presley, Trigg. On the West Virginia side, quarterback Garrett Green is still questionable for this one. I have no idea if he is actually going to play. Apparently, he is practicing. If he does play, I think he provides a ton of upside at a salary of $7,400 because he is a dual threat because this game is implied to have 58 points scored in it. I think that he's a pretty good look if he is healthy and active. If not, Nico Marchiol does not possess the same ceiling that Garrett Green does, and I will not be playing him. At the running back spot, Jaheim White is the explosive back. We've talked about this ad nauseum all season long. White is the guy that makes more explosive plays. Donaldson is more of a plotter, but you're starting to see more and more carries trend the direction of Jaheim White. I'm absolutely going to be playing Jaheim White in my player pool, but not CJ Donaldson. At the wide receiver spot, I don't think you have to stack Garrett Green because of his rushing ability. Hudson Clement is currently questionable for this game. And so what you will see is that Traylon Ray will be the number 1 wide receiver if Clement is out. Cole Taylor will be operating as the tight end, who's another top target. And Gallagher is another guy who will be playing, but he didn't get a whole lot of usage against Cincinnati. The guy that had the big game against Cincinnati was Justin Robinson, and he would be a guy who would be a beneficiary if Hudson Clement were to miss this game. Next up, last game of the day, we've got Nebraska taking on USC. USC is 9.5-point favorites with a game total of 50.5 points. The implied total is about 30-20 in favor of the Trojans. On the Nebraska side, Dylan Raiola is questionable. Heinrich Harburg would get the start if he does not go. Heinrich Harburg, slightly more of a runner than Dylan Raiola, might have a little bit of upside. Raiola, I've been down this road before. He's super cheap. He's super talented. He's super tempting, but I'm not going to play him. When you look at his games against Big 12 competition, he has not had a game against Big 12 competition better than 17 DraftKings points against Illinois, and that is not a good Illinois defense. So it's just going to be a pass for me. What I do want to target, though, is the running back spot. Every single regular Big 10 running back against USC has had a lot of success because I just don't think USC is built to stop the run in the Big Ten. They're just not. So Dante Dowdell would be a guy that I would absolutely be looking to. This Nebraska team has employed a running back committee all season long. It's starting to look more and more like Dowdell as the workhorse. He had 17 carries against UCLA, had 2 touchdowns in that game. I think this is an absolute smash spot for him at a salary of only $4,200. At the wide receiver spot, you're starting to see super more condensed usage with just Isaiah Nayer, who had 10 targets last week, and Ja'Cory Barney, who had 9 targets last week here in this Nebraska offense. But if Dylan Raiola is not the one throwing it to him, I don't have a whole lot of interest. On the USC side, they're making a move at quarterback. They're starting Jade Mayava, who was the previous starter at UNLV. He was pretty good at UNLV. So I don't necessarily think this is a bad decision. I think it's an interesting one because I thought he would win the job out of camp. He did not. Clearly, there was something that made them think Miller Moss was better coming out of training camp. But hey, he's getting his chance now. And, he's a little bit of an unknown. I think he's worth a shot, in my opinion. He's going to make my player pool. The running back spot, Woody Marks is their workhorse running back. If you're going to switch quarterbacks, you know what a new quarterback's best friend is? A good running game. And so Woody Marks is the workhorse running back. He will see a ton of catches in the pass game as well. I think he's a great play at the running back position. I think you could see more carries for him, higher rush rate out of USC because of the fact that they are playing a new quarterback. At the wide receiver spot, the good news is they seem to have finally settled on 2 receivers to be their guys in the passing game this year. Mekhi Lemon had 9 targets their last game against Washington, caught 8 of them for 70 yards and a touchdown. He's a great play. Zachariah Branch also had a lot of success in that game against Washington. 6 catches, 102 yards, was targeted 9 times. If these 2 guys are going to be the ones that they're throwing to, then it's very easy to just play those 2. They've employed a huge rotation over the course of the season, but against Washington, it was those 2 who broke through ahead of everybody else. So I'm going to hope and pray that usage from the Washington game is going to continue, and Lemon and Branch are going to be my 2 wide receivers from this USC side. But all right, that's going to do it for this week, y'all. Got all 12 games covered. Hopefully gave you guys all the information that you need in order to build some winning DFS lineups for the Saturday main slate. If the video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio. I cannot stress enough how much it helps me out when you guys do that. I really do appreciate it, and it helps me out more than you guys could ever know. But that's going to do it for me, y'all. We're going on 50 minutes now. We're going to go ahead and get on out of here. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of the college football season, as well as the rest of the college basketball season and any other content that can be coming your way. But the only way you'll know if it's coming your way or not is if you are subscribed to the channel. But that's going to do it for this week, guys. Like I said, hopefully we gave you guys a lot of information that's going to make building lineups here in this slate a little bit easier. I think it's odd that you have a ton of really good run defenses on this slate. So I think that, picking the running back position this week is going to be really weird. And that's going to be the position where money is won or lost. But that's going to do it for my breakdown. Hopefully we gave you guys a lot that can help you build your lineups. Best of luck to you guys on this Saturday main slate. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I'm going to see you guys next time.